Hi there, this is Beau.
And this is Gerry.
And this is Don't Insult My Intelligence.
It's the podcast that questions, challenges, and exposes things that just insult our intelligence.
And those things can come from anywhere. Politics, society, music, movies, television, wherever.
Yep, and we're going to talk about it all. And in most cases, it's probably going to piss some people off. Parents, be warned that this podcast is not for kids. It's PG-13 at best and a hard R at most other times.
A little background. Gerry and I have been friends since high school, and we've always thought and lived a little outside of the norm, and we generally push the edge on most topics.
Mm-hmm. And when we were young, Beau's dad, when he would bust us doing stuff, as dads will do, when we tried to argue any kind of BS explanation to him, he would just stop and stare us straight in the face and just say, "Don't insult my intelligence."
Yeah, that was one of his most frequent sayings, so we heard that quite a bit growing up.
So we thought it'd make a great podcast concept, and here it is.
So here we go.
Don't insult my intelligence.
When you go outside in the middle of nowhere, you look around you and you see a half circle. And then, if you take a picture of the earth, at the bottom, there's going to be a half circle. So the earth is not flat, it's round. And if you want full proof, then be an astronaut yourself and go out and look at the earth and say, oh, well, the earth is round. Okay, that's just wherever it is.
Today we got a good one. We're starting off with a softball, and it is the flat earth theory. So...
Yeah. So I tell you, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be insulting. I'm going to give it 5 minutes before I start insulting anything about this.
Right.
I'm going to try to think positively about it and like give it like a little bit of credence. I can't, but I'm going to at least attempt it.
Right.
Yeah. Guess what? Out of 300,000 people, everybody else should love this and not be insulted. So,
yeah, it is kind of funny that in this day and age, there are people out there that actually wholeheartedly believe that the Earth is actually flat, that it is a flat disc, or it's a flat cone, or that really it's surrounded by like an ice wall, right? And that the oceans stay on the edges because the ice wall that is Antarctica is, keeping the oceans in.
right.
Yeah, and it's kind of laughable, but go ahead.
I'm trying. Like I said, I'm going to keep an open mind for 5 minutes. Yeah, I would encourage anybody, if they've never even heard of this, to please look it up. And you'll see diagrams and pictures of what Beau is just explaining.
Right.
And like you said, to some it's a cone, to some it's a plate. But either one that you see, it's not the Earth as you know it, or as that you've been taught to understand. It's something quite different.
Well, it's not even the Earth that you can, like, any elementary school kid can go out and really kind of disprove that it's not flat, or at least maybe not prove definitively, but they can at least start down the path that if you're really going to prove it's round or not flat, that you can do scientifically. So, wow.
I beg to differ. I almost think that any elementary school child could disprove this
right
scientifically. But
well, maybe without knowing it, but yeah, you really can, and a lot of people, you could really just drop a pencil onto the ground, and really you've proven that the Earth is not flat there. And we'll get into a little bit of that later, because folks might be scratching their head, well, how does that prove that it's not flat?
Sure.
Right, because then and I don't mean to kind of jump ahead, but there's part of the flat earthers, which they're called, there's this real group of people called the flat earthers, that believe the Earth is actually rushing up in direction, which creates gravity. Like, that's what creates gravity, is that the disk of the Earth is moving straight up in space. So kind of that elevator effect, kind of keeps you, or the rocket launch effect, I guess, is what makes things drop to the ground.
Oh, okay. Well, then I take it back. I'm gonna bypass my 5 minutes.
Right.
And I'm going to go ahead and call bullshit on these people who are complete idiots. So,
yes,
because this that's a new one. So I haven't heard that. And so now what you're telling me is, so the Earth is continuously moving up. That's how gravity is created.
Well, that's the other thing. Right, and that's the other thing. It's whatever helps prove their point at the time. It seems that's what folks seem to use. So if it makes more sense for the Earth to be still, and that helps prove that it's flat, then the Earth is still. If it helps to the Earth is rushing up, then that is what's happening. I mean, it's just all over the place. So
okay. Well, I'm sorry, it can't be all.
Right.
I mean, it's one or the other.
Right.
And so...
And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. There's lots of circular logic and some contradictory stuff going on here, so...
Well, absolutely. So I'm going to guess, and people, please, you're going to have to understand and believe when you listen to this. It might seem disjointed, but it's because of all of their theories and hypotheses are crazy.
Sure.
Because at one point, the Earth is, let's go off of the basic one where it's a plate, okay? And
by plate, you mean it's just a flat
It's a flat
disc.
Yeah, it's like if you took a Frisbee, but flattened it out even more than that, right? And just hung it in space.
Yep.
That's kind of like one of the theories. And if that's the case, it's that or the cone. It's the only two I've seen, examples of it. But if that's the case, from what I have read, the Earth doesn't move.
Right.
Which then also disproves the Earth always moving up, which causes gravity.
Yeah, because that would mean the sun and the moon would also be like we'd all be moving up in this like collective ether together, all at the same speed.
That's right.
Right, which then just tosses out any kind of Newtonian, physics on how things move. Because even though there's no gravity really in space, there's still effects of moving through space and time, which they've just now, those don't exist. So
and that I will say this, gravity, it cracks me up. The little bit of research that I've done, because I'm sorry, I felt that I didn't need to do it so much.
I did the research, so we'll just get your straight emotional reactions, which is half of it anyway.
All right, so when I looked at, for instance, like if you go into social media sites and look up flatliners pages and their forums, they encourage you to ask questions. And I saw quite a few on gravity. And then their answer was, like, condescendingly, they'd be like, gravity? Like we haven't heard that question before. It's like, well, I don't care if you've heard it a million times. I haven't heard the answer, and I'm waiting for it, and there is no answer.
Right.
They can't give a definitive answer on gravity.
Right.
I mean, so I don't know.
Yes.
This thing is crazy.
Yep.
And I'm going to start by just saying, I hope anybody who hears this who's a flat earther, I swear I hope I offend you to no end, because it is the dumbest crap I've ever heard. I was just saying today that if someone gave me the choice of believing in flat Earth or Santa Claus, I'm all about Santa Claus, because this is so stupid. Right. I've never heard anything so asinine. Yeah,
and the thing is you actually have to work a little harder to prove that there's no Santa Claus. I mean, because number one, St. Christopher was real, and to actually prove there's no Santa Claus, that's a big experiment. That'd be hard to do. It'd be hard to actually definitively prove there's no Santa Claus, but we can absolutely definitively prove that the Earth is not flat, that the Earth is round. I mean, there's just so many things. And when you start looking into it, the legitimate science sites and magazines, they're all hesitant to even respond to it, because just responding to it, in the science world means that it's actually something worth debating, that it actually has merit.
Right, you give it legitimacy to a
right,
degree.
yeah, you give it legitimacy, and you know, there's legitimate scientific debates. I mean, because you know the whole subject. I don't mean to get into global warming and climate change, but there's actually valid scientific evidence on both sides of that argument. And in this case, there's just no valid scientific evidence, and it all falls apart really quickly. So
it does.
Yeah.
And for people who have never heard of this, because you're sane and logical, I get it. I go, but the thing is, when you start looking into it, I mean, don't get me wrong, like anything, there are crackpots who are believing in this just to like rub the grain the wrong way. I get that. But there are a lot of people that truly do believe this. And it's just, I find it, especially in the 21st century, how anybody can actually believe this. And I'm sure most of you are too. And part of it is you ask the most basic questions. Like the first one and when I brought this up just to try to test people and talk about flat earthers, the first thing that comes up is, well, what about pictures from the space station in space? Well, yeah, you would think, what about that?
They're fake.
But guess what?
Yeah,
they're fake.
They're
just
fake.
like the moon landing.
Yep.
That's their answer to it.
Yeah, the space station is fake. It's something in a studio, you know, where NASA has a studio, and it's not really real. And then the other thing, you know, which is, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but like the question is okay. And I get it. There's lots of conspiracy theories where part of the thing is why is it being covered up, and that's part of the thing. It's like, well, we don't know why, because if we knew why, that would be such a big revelation that it would be, you know, crushing to humanity. But in this case, it's just so easily to prove it. So we can, you know, and you know, I'm kind of itching to get into some of that, right?
Yeah.
Some of the things that debunk it, but I just, you know, and again, just, you know, I'm not a scientist and neither are you, but this is one of those things where I'd actually love to have somebody, and maybe we can one day have somebody on here that believes this and is kind of an expert in it, that can give us some real points that we could debate. Because I'd actually like to hear something, you know, that actually convinced me that, hey, well, maybe that's actually kind of something maybe that we can't disprove really easily. Okay. But and the reason this is even interesting, you know, like this is, you know, this it's almost to the point where, you know, hey, you know, we're all, you know, dogs can talk, and dogs are who really control the world. You know, that's the level of this kind of this theory. Right? Because, I mean, if dogs are controlling the world, they're doing it in a way that it's so beyond our ability to recognize it that we can't even see it. It would be at that kind of level, right?
Well, right.
You know?
I mean, yeah. And so, yeah. And I mean, I guess to go back to what you were saying, it's like, you're right. Because I guess one of the quickest knee-jerk reactions when they're asked,
right,
if this is true, why doesn't anyone know it? Like you said, it's like, well, it's a government cover-up,
right?
And again, like you said, why would the government cover this up? And we've talked about this before, and like my examples to give to that, like, you know, Area 51, right? It's like, I get why the government, if that's true, why they would cover that up, because people would freak out if at some point they knew aliens had been here, right, and could still be here, and they don't know whether they're good or bad or whatever. This makes no sense to me, because it's like the Earth is round. Oh wait, hold on, nope, newsflash, it's flat.
Right.
But your daily life will go on the same way,
right?
So no reason to freak out. It's like, I mean, why would you freak out other than to just tell yourself, well, I feel like a fool? I mean, but other than that, who's going to freak out? I mean,
right.
Well, and no one's going to freak out, because it can't be proven true, because it's such crap. I mean, Give me a break.
Yep. So, all right. So let's talk about where this thing started from, unless you have some more just reaction to the craziness of this thing.
I'll have reactions as we go.
Okay, yeah. So there's nothing. Yeah, there's no way you won't. So it appears that in the middle to earlier 1800s that a map system, you know, came into being called an azimuth map, which is really just a a way to describe measuring an angle. Okay, and so what they were doing is they were trying to be able to calculate for ships how long it would take to get from point A to point B, and even the crazy thing there. So what they did is they tried to make a map of the world and flat so they could draw lines on it. Because if you've ever tried to draw a line on, like, take a marker and write on a balloon, or draw on you ever written your name on a basketball? Remember how you used to do that,
sure.
Kids? Like, it's hard to do anything longer than a small line is hard to do because it's round and it's hard to negotiate that. So they made this flat map where the North Pole would be the center of the circle. So if you make a circle and you lay the Earth out on it flat, the North Pole's in the circle. And then what they would do, they draw all the lines of longitude go out in like pizza pie slices, but there's a lot of them. And then the latitude lines are circular out, so it creates this, circular pattern. And then what you could do, you can put a line, put a point in one spot on the Earth, say in the Pacific Ocean, and then you can put a spot on the other side. And then what you would do, you could draw a line there, but then you had to apply a mathematical theory to that to account for the arc of the Earth. So the whole map itself was just a way to draw points, make it easy for cartographers and people to be able to gauge distance and to get points on the map. But in order to do it, you didn't just draw a straight line and go, oh, okay, that's 12 inches and that converts into miles, so it's that far. No, you had to actually put in the parts of the Pythagorean theorem and parts of pi, things that are math and have formulas to do with circulars, with circular globes and structures. So that's kind of the funny thing. So the thing that it's based on actually is based on the Earth being round. It's just a different projection of the Earth. It's just a way to work with it in our dimensions. And you got to think at the time, in the 1800s, yes, there were globes, but it was hard to make a globe that was functional that you could use. Those were rare things. Like, you had to be rich to own a globe, right? Sure. A model of the Earth. And people couldn't think. Nobody knew about 3D projection and stuff like that. So it was hard to even imagine that stuff. So they had to work with what they were used to, which was a flat map, right? And that's where that came from. So, and then, the other part of the theory is when the United Nations, so here's where kind of that globalist thing comes into, the United Nations logo is a version of this flat, azimuth style map, with the leaves around it. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, look, the United Nations, obviously the Earth's flat because look at their secret cool logo. And really, the thing is when you look into that, really the reason it's flat is because it goes on a flag. A whole lot better if things are flat. Flat patterns just map to a flat sheet that you hang from a pole that blows in the wind easier than a globe. And, then the United Nations is all about all the nations being there and everybody's flag. You ever see the United Nations building? It has flags out there. All the flags are out there, and one in the middle is the United Nations one. So it's just this weird conspiracy that the Earth is flat, but it's actually based on a map that you have to calculate the roundness of the Earth for that map to work. So it just makes no sense. So the main thing is wrong. It's wrong fundamentally from the beginning. So
yes, and for everyone listening, if you've never heard this, so understand too that the Earth is not the only thing that's flat, right? The sun is flat. The moon is flat. Right. Everything is a flat plate hanging in space.
Yes.
Ironically enough, it all just happens to be situated correctly where it faces each other, so it can be seen.
Yes.
But
so we're locked into this perfect tidal orbit between the sun and the moon, where the flat discs of the sun and the moon show themselves to us in their full 360-degree flatness at all times, no matter where you are on the Earth, no matter what time of day it is, no matter what time you are. And, by the way, Jupiter and Saturn and Venus and Mars also do the same thing. When you look through the telescope, they all just are all facing us directly all the time.
Right. Yeah, the backside is dark, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I guess. Right, exactly.
Dark. It's okay. But I mean, we're all showboats in space, right? We all need to show our good side, and that's seemingly what we're doing with them.
That's right. So then, so
Go
now we can get into the debunking. No, go ahead. Finish your
Well,
thought.
I was going to say, I mean, because for people who might not know, I mean, we've talked about this for quite a bit, but I mean, also understand that we don't rotate. Okay, we don't have revolutions.
Yeah.
We also don't evolve around the sun.
Right.
So, just so everybody knows, now I don't know where the sun goes, I don't know where the moon goes, but it doesn't matter.
They revolve around the Earth. I guess is.
Well, that's right. We're the center of the universe. That's correct. I
Yes.
forgot.
So we have to go back to that as well. So pre-Copernicus. Back to where we're the center. I think that's called a heliocentric view of the universe, right? And so the heliosphere is everything we can see from Earth. So so we're at the center of the Earth, and really it goes back to this strange, and again that's where it breaks down. So it's like, okay, so if you try to start drawing out, all right, we're a flat plane, and the sun goes around us, and the moon goes around that too, in a different orbit, and you actually start trying to map that out and diagram it, it all falls apart.
Sure.
Because there's night and day. And so how, explaining how that works is really difficult. If the Earth is flat, then it's going to be, like that phenomenon at the North and the South Pole. And sorry, we have to get back into the Earth is round now. So, because the Earth is, the Earth is at an angle, the axis of the Earth is not straight up and down, proportionally and relationally to the sun. It's at an angle. So at certain times of the year when the North or South Pole is facing away or towards the sun, there's some parts of the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle certain times of the year where the sun never sets because it never gets below the horizon. The circle, the angle where you see the sun just rotate in a circle around the sky. So that's, if the Earth was really flat and the sun was going around the Earth, that's what we would see. It would be constant level of twilight or daylight or all the dark all the time. If the Earth, because the sun, I don't know, it would never set because we could see it. And so, but they're going to say, no, it rotates around, but it just doesn't work like that. So anyway.
Well, of course it doesn't work that way.
And then the time zones wouldn't be equal. Like the time zones are relatively equal. Like the spans of day and night across the Earth are equal if you're in the same hemisphere, right?
Well, yeah.
So,
sure. Well, I mean, on that note, all right, look, let's just pretend that, our intelligence level has dropped completely.
Yes.
So it's like, okay,
I feel like it really is. Trying to just get this in my head.
And these things, they evolve around us, okay? So
Sure.
If you're looking at it like that, then sure, I get it. I guess the moon's on one side while the sun's on the other. And that's easy. That can be. They can use that to easily say why the sun. See, it comes up in the east and it sets in the west, right? It's like, okay, but the point with what you were just saying. So then account for seasons, right? Account for why in real life on one side of the equator it's this time of year, it's this season, and on the other it's this season.
Yeah,
I mean.
Yeah, today, just like it was recorded, it's December 11th, 2017. It's winter in the northern hemisphere, and in Australia, it's summer.
That's right.
Right? Why? Why is that?
Well, right. According to them, why would there be seasons at all? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So if it helps everybody, believe me, the debunking will start opening more doors of questions when you start hearing things.
Yes.
So, all right, let's just go off actually, why don't we go with what we had discussed earlier?
Okay. The first debunking?
And
then we can go from there.
Yeah, if it's a flat plane everywhere. I mean, granted, there are mountains, don't get me wrong. I mean, you might not be able to see over the mountains, but Beau had asked earlier.
Yeah, you just want to go with the general debunkings? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
No, so Beau had just asked earlier, it's like, if their theory is true, then why couldn't, you should be able to go up on the Empire State Building and see Mount Everest, right?
Right.
You should. I mean,
with a telescope,
granted,
maybe. Yeah, you might need a telescope.
Well, yeah, I mean, using telescope. I mean, but again,
Sure.
that's not too far-fetched because there are telescopes with magnification that we can see into space. We should certainly be able to see across the globe if it's flat.
Right. So, and that's kind of based on the fact, like, okay, well, what are you talking about? So that's based on the fact that you can look up in the sky and you can see the moon. So your line of sight from your eyeball to the moon is a straight line. It is a straight, laser beam, eye level photon light particle traveling from the moon to your eyeball, right? So, and the reason you can see it is because the Earth's atmosphere is relatively thin when you're looking straight up. That's as thin as, unless you're in a plane or higher or the top of a mountain, the Earth is relatively thin. But if you're going to look, if the Earth was flat and you're talking about, a disc, if you just unpeeled the Earth like a orange peel, it's going to be huge. It's going to be a very long, surface. It's going to be thousands and thousands of miles. So you're going to be looking through thousands and thousands of miles of atmosphere, which is going to cause distortion, which is going to reflect light. So you're not going to be able to see clearly from here to Nepal, even though you're looking at the largest thing on the planet. But theoretically, if it was flat, you should be able to have a telescope and see, maybe not all the way to Mount Everest, but you should be able to see across the ocean, with a telescope,
How about this? Just like I had said earlier, let's not even go that far.
Right.
If you live in Boston, you should be able to go on top of the tallest building and see New York City.
Correct.
You should be able to see it, but you can't.
Yep. And you should be able to go up there every day until you can see it, because you can always say, okay, well, there's too much pollution, there's too much this, but eventually there should be a day where you can see really fucking far.
That's right.
But the thing is on every clear day, so you could, if you did this for, say, 6 months, right? Because you're going to have varying weather. So if you did it for, say, 6 months or a year, every day you focused your telescope or you focused your eyes on infinity out to the horizon, you will see, if you do that every day, that you can only see so far every time. On the clearest of clear days, you can only see a certain amount. And what you're seeing is the horizon, which is the curvature of the Earth, to where the light doesn't bend around, so you can't see, and then that's what you're going to see, and that is an experiment that has been done, and it comes back with the results that we just described. And then that kind of leads us to the very first debunking. So this whole thing, the first fact that's ignored in this argument is, when this azimuth map was created in the 1800s or maybe 1700s, in 1849 there was this big thing in England where there's this big debate on, is the Earth round or flat? Okay, and you got to remember, during this time, this is kind of around the time of the Industrial Revolution, and big ideas are coming out, and big things are changing, and people are starting to become educated, and the level of just general education is increasing in populated parts of the world. So you kind of having a renaissance of just base level intellectualism, and so everything is back up for debate again. Just kind of like it is now. It's weird. And maybe the internet is really, and we can get into this a little bit, maybe the internet is what's causing this. The internet is obviously, I think will probably be looked at as the Industrial Revolution. Obviously, it's the information revolution, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of the time, because now, if you think about it today, every 2 weeks, there's some new thing, there's some awesome thing that everybody's freaking out about, whether it's driverless cars or this or that, or the new Snapchat or this or whatever. So now the thing was, you can debate anything. So there was a big debate about, is the Earth flat? And this writer, and I think his name is Samuel Robotham, he was convinced the earth was flat, and he was convinced he could prove it. Now, he was a writer, he wasn't a scientist, but he did some measurements in England on a river that was relatively flat and relatively straight. And he said, I take these measurements and there's no curve to anything. It's completely straight. And then what he was doing, because he wasn't a cartographer or a geologist, he wasn't taking into consideration the refraction of light. Okay, which can be scientifically proven, and it's something that surveyors use when they're surveying over long distances. They have to take into consideration how light bends and refracts in the atmosphere, and when you do that, you can certainly see that your reference points go down and down and down and down. They angle down towards the horizon. So this guy in England in 1849, it's kind of like the first documented flat Earth debunking case. So he has this contest, the whatever the paper in London is, I forget what it's called. Is it the London Herald? I can't remember what London, the London paper, it's been the same name forever. Can't remember. But they sponsored it. You know what the name of the paper in London is, by the way? Oh, I just want to know for some reason.
I don't know the name of the paper.
Okay. Anyway, whatever. So the main paper in London at the time, they sponsored it. So they offered a prize of like £500, which in 1849 was a giant amount of money. And they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. If you can debunk, if you can prove the Earth isn't flat, you win this $500. So this one surveyor guy gets out there. He's like, bip, 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 boom. It curves, and here's the proof. You can see the angle decrease over distance. And they had some scientists from Oxford look at the data, and they're like, yep, he's right. The Earth is not flat. And then, boom, disproven, but that entered into like a big court fight, and the guy never got his money, and they, were bitter rivals the rest of their lives till they die. So that's where the controversy started right there. But it was debunked right there, right from the get-go. So, but for some reason now, I don't know what it is, people want to just jump on this thing that the Earth is flat, and I don't get it. I don't know where it started contemporarily, where it started recently. Do you have any idea?
No, from what I looked up,
was a rapper or something recently?
It kind of died out. It died out toward the end of the 1800s, but then kicked back in at the beginning of the 1900s, and it's kind of been hanging on ever since. Now, as for why, I don't know. It's like anything. I can't sit here and begin to get my head around what people believe or don't believe, but I guess with this one, that's where I have an issue with, because this is based off science, and the majority of the general population, they know this to be true, and they believe that we're a sphere.
Right.
Why? I mean, and look, there are many beliefs, and I guess that's my issue. Like, we could, there's religion, and there are different religious beliefs, and that's fine, because it's a belief, and it's based on faith. They're trying to say this isn't based on faith. They're saying is fact, and they say it's based on science, but yet can't provide the science that it's based off of. So that's where I have a huge issue with this. I mean,
yep,
I just don't get it. And so yes, that was the first debunking. But to sit there and break it down, I mean, there's no hole that cannot be put into this thing and then ripped open larger than life.
Yes.
I mean, there just can't be. I mean, like I said, a child could do it. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and there's another one there, one of the ones that where science just is relative scale is just ignored, and if you look at anything, you don't deal with a ping pong ball the same way you deal with, a bowling ball, right? Those are two different things, right, in the physical world, okay? Like, you can, a ping pong ball, somebody's throwing that at you, there's nothing really, you just bat it away, right? There's a way you can deal with a ping pong ball, it's pretty easy. Somebody throws a bowling ball at you, you got to get out of the way of that thing, right? So, two different things, right, that in reality, and it's the same kind of thing in this one. So, one of the things that they use is say, hey, the Earth is not round, because if the Earth is round and was spinning at thousands of miles an hour, which is what it actually does, that we would fly off, and the water and the oceans would zoom out into space, right? And I saw this one video where they took a Nerf ball and they submerged it in water and like got it all filled up with water and then spun it around the air and they see all the water fly out, right? And so they say, there, look, see, that's proof that if the Earth was really spinning around, the water would fly off and we would fly off. Okay. And the actuality is that's not proof at all because of like the ping pong ball versus a bowling ball type of scenario. Not really the size, but just it is not the same thing. It is completely, it's not even apples and oranges. It's, it's rocks and feathers. You know what I mean?
Right. It's the mass of it. Sure. Of course.
Exactly. Well, it's mass and it's just scale. Because the thing is, when you spin, so if you think about it, like remember, and it's one of these things that they don't have anymore. So this is definitely one of these don't insult my intelligence things. One of these things in playgrounds, and I guess because kids get hurt too much, is there's no little mini merry-go-rounds in playgrounds anymore. Do you ever notice that? They were the best,
are the
right? But the little small ones, and maybe they're like, maybe at the biggest there was one that was maybe 10 feet in diameter, but most of them were smaller than that, right? And you get on those things and you kick it and you start going in a circle, and what when that happens, you feel you're being thrown off of it, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And here's the reason why. The reason why you're being thrown off of it is because you're rotating in a complete circle really fast. Like, so you're making a complete revolution, in like 1 second. So you're revolving 60 times a minute, or maybe more, maybe 100 or 150 times a minute. Okay, so the relative speed at the edge of that merry-go-round is really fast. And the thing is, when you're going that fast, when you're making a complete circular revolution that fast, that generates the energy that throws shit out through centrifugal force. Okay, Now the Earth, yes, it is moving at thousands of miles an hour. It is spinning, and I forget what it is, but it's thousands of miles an hour. But the Earth is so huge, it only goes around once every 24 hours. So if you got on a merry-go-round and you spun around once every 24 hours, not only would you not fall off, you would barely even perceive that you were moving. You wouldn't even know that you were moving. You could sit, you could make a house of cards on this thing while it's spinning around at 1 revolution a day, and the cards wouldn't even fall over. There wouldn't be enough centrifugal force to knock your house of cards over. So
that's right.
That is why the water doesn't fly off the Earth. Part of the reason. The other reason is gravity. But
let's be fair.
Okay, sorry. Gravity doesn't exist.
The other reason, well, it doesn't according to them. And also, the reason that water and just material objects, tangible things, don't fly off. Well, I mean, for one, they say because we don't rotate. But if we rotated, the reason we won't fly off is because we have that nice, handy ice wall to like catch us and keep us perfectly intact right here on the flat planet.
That's
it's
right.
Yes,
the ice wall that they see on the azimuth map, because Antarctica happens to be on the opposite side. So the thing is, if you flip the map over and made Antarctica the South Pole the middle of the map, then we would have like an Earth wall, and partly, their whole theory goes away because there's not ice all the way around. Like the North Pole is water and land and ice. So that also falls apart there.
The whole thing is stupid. I mean, like
it really is.
It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. If you want to do some research, feel free to go to any social media site listing flat earthers and give them hell, because they are the biggest idiots to walk the earth. It's dumb. But, all right, so take the basketball. As you had said earlier, the world as we know it, right? It's a sphere. Here's a basketball. All right, now, somebody take that basketball and make this flat map for me. In order to do it, you're going to have to cut it one end of the ball, and then you've got the hole. You're going to have to peel this thing back, right? And to peel it back, you're going to have to cut it so you can lay it flat. So that's what they're claiming the Earth is. So you lay it flat, and when you lay it flat, if you lay this thing flat, once you've done it to the basketball, before, if you took a magic marker, a black one, and put a pin dot on one part of the basketball and then a red magic marker and a dot somewhere else, once you peel this thing back and lay it flat, the distance between those two dots is going to be so much more immense than it was when it was a sphere, right? Are you getting my point?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, the distance gets heavily distorted. It stretches everything because on these maps, it's not cut. They're not gaps in the map. Like, you know, you can't, like, so what you're talking about can't really be done. You'd have to stretch the basketball to make it flat.
The only other way to do it, I mean, even that doesn't work, is if you were to take the ball from axis to axis,
right,
and point to point and slice it, right, and then try to peel it open, lay it flat. But even then, because it was a sphere, you're going to have bumps and humps and curves up at the top and the bottom. It's like it doesn't work. I mean, so the only way to flatten it out is to peel it back. So my point though is you peel it back, like we had discussed. Then if that's the way it is, then explain to me, if you take this newfound map of yours and what we already know about miles and distance on the Earth as it is, and travel, because I mean you might not be into space travel, but they can't dispute that there's air travel.
That's right.
Or sea travel. And if you do that, it's like, okay, all of a sudden going from point A to point B becomes a lot longer distance and takes a lot longer time.
You got it. And that is probably the second easiest way to debunk this whole thing, and you nailed it, is flight times, because you can look and it's kind of funny. So like when we were talking about this before, like New Zealand is really the country that it's the flat earth debunk country, because it's a good spot to use to disprove or to prove the point you're making about distance being distorted, and how you can do a real life measurement and show that thing that you're talking about. And really the ones that I found on the web, this one guy has this website that where he's done all this to show, I guess he was in a really heated debate about this with whomever, and he proved it pretty much in like two different ways. And the first one, is flight times from New Zealand to Los Angeles, and then from New Zealand to Buenos Aires in Chile, South America. So both of those flight times are only like 10 minutes different. So it's like 12 hours and 40 minutes from Auckland, New Zealand to LA, and it's 12 hours and 50 minutes from Auckland, New Zealand to Buenos Aires, right? Mm-hmm. So what that means is that it's roughly the same flight distance on a round Earth, okay?
Right.
So, and what you can do is you can track the planes. So you can have somebody get on the plane, and you can watch them get on the plane, and they can land in Los Angeles, and they can call you when they land, and you can see how long it took, right? And you can do the same thing in Buenos Aires, and then you can go on these websites and you can see the arrival and departure times, okay? So you're talking about hundreds of people, hundreds of witnesses, multiple times a day, thousands of times a year, traveling these distances in relatively the same amount of time. And they might vary by a few minutes here or there based on wind resistance and weather, and maybe they had to make a deviation, here or there to go around a storm or something, right? But in generally, the pilots make up for that. So taking your example of peeling that basketball, if you look at the azimuth map of the Earth, although those flight times are the same, if you draw lines, so if the Earth was flat, you would have to fly in straight lines, right, from New Zealand to Los Angeles. And if you look at this map, and I have a picture on it, where I'll put up there where I've drawn these lines in red. If you go from New Zealand to Los Angeles, the line, is roughly 2 inches long. And if you go from New Zealand to Buenos Aires, that line is 4 times longer. It's like 8 inches long. So right. You're talking 4 times the distance, but somehow, magically, you can fly there in the same amount of time every day, all year round. So, I mean, and it's because planes, and I know this is crazy, everybody hold on to your hats, because they're flying around a globe, not flat.
That's right. Well, and hold on. And the biggest thing you have to think about, too, when it comes to especially flight, is in reality, you can fly a plane through the sky over Antarctica, but you can't do that.
Right.
With the flat earthers thing, because there is no continent of Antarctica. It's a big ice wall that's a big ring around the earth.
And on the other side of it is space, right?
Right.
So
let's
put that on hold, because I thought of something new about that ice wall, which would be so cool. But so that's the other thing. So now you've hit on the fact of the other element of New Zealand is the debunking flat Earth capital of the world, right? Is because there's this misnomer. So part of what a lot of these flat earthers do is they say you're not allowed to fly over Antarctica, right? Nobody flies over the poles. And so there's two things about that. Both of those are wrong. Okay. So in general, flights over Antarctica are restricted. Now there's all kinds of theories about just that alone. There's people that aren't saying the earth is flat, but there are major conspiracy theories, and some are actually kind of cool. And maybe we can talk about those. There's this awesome one about the Germans in World War II had all kinds of advanced technology in Antarctica, and they sent a mission down there, and we can get in that route. I actually really love that one. It's called Operation Highjump, and it's really cool. But the flying over Antarctica is restricted by a treaty, okay, that was put in place, I forget when, but in sometime in the 20th century, around World War II or something. I can't remember. Right. So, but the misnomer is that you can't fly. It's against the law to fly over Antarctica. It is mostly true, but that is not 100% true, because there's a company right now, and I'll put a link to it on our page, that shows a company that you can. It costs $1,200 or $1,500. You can fly over the South Pole, and they go once or twice a month. So they have a permit. So they don't do it every day, but they do it once or twice a month, every month of the year. They fly over Antarctica. So it's a tourist trip in a plane, and you fly over there, and you can see the entire continent of Antarctica, and you can fly over it. And there are 1,000 YouTube videos of it out there, which I'm sure, I guess, are all faked, right? But you can fly over Antarctica. And then the other side of that is, they also say you can't fly over the North Pole. Also, horseshit, because most flights that are direct to Russia from the United States, they fly partly over the Arctic Circle, because it saves 10 hours, because you're going over the pole versus going all the way around, a lower latitude, which is way, way far. It's like 10 times farther to fly. So, right. You can fly over the poles, and you can go there.
So wait a minute, and I get it, because according to them, there aren't poles, so there's nothing to fly over. But they're saying you can't fly over the poles, but yet they're saying the North Pole, and even though there shouldn't be a pole, because the pole is the imaginary line that runs through the center of the sphere, but whatever.
Yeah, right.
That's not a fact, but yet they reference the North Pole as being the center of their world. Right. So you're telling me you can't fly, so you could not fly from one end of the flat Earth to another in a straight line, and you're going to cross over the North Pole.
Right. I guess.
But you can't fly over the pole. I mean, whatever. None of it makes sense to me. I mean, geez. Because it's all hypocritical, and they talk in circles on each other.
Right. Well, then the other thing is, how we just described how the distances on a flat Earth don't line up with the flight plans? Well, the opposite of that works. Like once you get to the center of it, once you get to that middle part, right, those distances are distorted in the other way. Like right around the pole, the center of the map, then the distances don't line up right, because the math works in reverse. So like if you were in Greenland and you're going to fly to Alaska in a straight line, right, it would actually take you longer, because that's actually longer than it is on this map.
Right.
So,
right. No, absolutely.
So none of it lines up with reality. No,
it's stupid. But here's my thing. I don't have an issue. I mean, honestly, if someone believes in something, even if what they're telling me I know is just bunk, but if they believe it and they can get some semblance of rationale out of it somehow, I'm like, okay, I'll listen to it. But what really kills me with this is how they always, everything is fake. Anything you throw up, it's like,
Sure.
well, that's fake. That's a lie. That's fake, or that's covered up.
Right.
Well, okay. We don't know why there would be a cover up to this. I mean, I'd love to know what the cover up is. I mean, and what is it you're covering up that every single government in the world, and some of them can't stand each other, but yet with this, they're all like, oh no, yeah, but this is such a big deal. We're
Right.
all on the same side. Let's keep this hidden. I mean, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe we're just, floating on this maybe we're just this little flat thing in like a globe that's sitting on some super giant, being's desk, and all the governments of the world realize that, and we just don't, but so, hey, let me talk about the ice wall for a second. So what would be really cool if the ice wall was really there holding everything in? That would mean, like, if you on the other side of the ice wall that would be space, right? So you
That's
could
what
just
it should be. Yeah.
right, so you could just step off into space. Because if we're rushing, if the only thing that's holding us up is the upward momentum of the flat Earth disk, like hurtling upwards, in space, which, by the way, I don't know really would create the force that we're talking about to hold everything down, because I don't know if it really works that way. But you should be able just to step off the edge, right? If it's an elevator rising up,
That's right.
You should just be able to step off.
Well, you should. And you know what? Here you go. So let's talk, since they like to debunk or try to debunk the whole thing with the Earth rotation and gravity and how you would just fly off. So I guess my question, and the whole going in tune with the spinning at thousands miles per hour. I guess my thing is, so if we're moving up, consistently moving up, right? I'd like to know at what speed we're moving up. What scientific experiment they've proven this? Because, I mean, if you're looking at that and we're always moving up,
yeah.
I mean, depending on how fast we're going, wouldn't we all just be plastered to the earth? I mean, how would you even get up to move around? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
I don't know. I guess the same way, that the gravity well that the Earth creates is keeping us, our feet pressed against, maybe it's just because, maybe again, it's this, there is legitimate, there's legitimate science around, like super scale, because we don't even feel the Earth's gravity, because at our level and our size, gravity is really weak. Because if you think about it, you can overcome, because like right now on my desk, I'm looking at my glasses. My glasses are resting on the desk. Gravity is holding my glasses on my desk. But with just the greatest of ease, I can pick them up. So I have overcome the force of gravity just that easily at this scale. Because at this scale, it's very, very weak, right? But at a planetary scale, it's very, very strong. It keeps us. It keeps the moon relatively close to us.
Sure.
So again, it doesn't make any sense. So if we're moving relative to everything we can visibly observe in the universe. So then, at some point, are we really even moving up?
Well, why would we be moving? I don't understand where they came up with that. Why would we need to move at all?
Well, I think what they're doing is they're expanding, and no pun intended, is they're expounding. I'll say that they're expounding upon the expanding universe. Hypothesis that and Edwin Hubble, I believe, came up with the theory, and it's not a law yet, and that's the other thing, is it's a theory, meaning that most scientists agree and can show evidence that this is true. Because there's a hypothesis which is really just a, hey, I have an idea about how something works, and then once you test it, then it becomes a theory, and then over time, as a majority of scientists agree, something becomes a law, like the law of gravity, right? The law of angular momentum and all these things. But the expanding universe, I believe, is still a theory, it's not a law yet, because there's certain doubt you can cast on certain aspects of that. But in general, from what we observe, everything that we can see is rushing away from each other. Everything outside of a certain distance. Like we're not rushing away from the moon. We're locked in here together. Like the sun is locked, the planets are locked into gravity with the sun. The sun is locked into gravity with Alpha Centauri, the closest star. That's locked in with our little local groups, and we're all kind of locked in like a gravity well around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. But the Andromeda galaxy, which is the closest galaxy to us, it is rushing away from us, and we are rushing away from it. But it's just really, it's hard to explain. It's like an expanding balloon. Like space is, So I think they're kind of hopping on that theory, that the expansion of the universe is what's keeping us pinned and forced to the ground.
I don't even know if they believe that. I thought it was all about we're moving up just because they have to have some type of answer to prove why there's gravity.
Right. It's a turtle. It's a turtle. It's the turtles all the way down. There's turtles keep stacking underneath us. From Year to the Turtle. And
it's stupid.
Yes. It's really.
I hope to God somebody, if you're a flat earther, please comment on this. I mean, I'll listen to you. I am going to ridicule you, but I will listen to you. I mean, and I have questions because it doesn't make sense. I mean, and I've yet to see, and I'm sorry. I want somebody, and now granted, I haven't looked at everything out there on flat earthers, and I relish going through and looking at actual supposed scientific discussions and forums on this, but I just can't believe that. I believe people have had them, but I can't believe someone walks away from that thinking that they won the debate. I just can't. I mean, I don't understand how that would even go through their mind. That doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, and then the only other one there, like some of the trump cards that they throw at it is they say it's in the Bible, and then once you start talking about the Bible, you can't argue with the Bible. But if you look at the Bible passages, even those there's nothing that at least I can see that says the earth is flat. It's all speculative and it's all interpretation from the Bible, right?
Yep.
And one of them is, there's a passage where it says God looked down on the circle of the earth, and then it's actually, you got to remember that the earlier texts of the Bible are written in several different languages, and the Hebrew that they're using to back this up, the circle of the earth was really, it was really truly translates to circle. It doesn't translate to sphere, and it also has this, it's kind of like flat surface that this word supposedly meant in ancient Hebrew, which again, that's probably, I'm sure, open to debate, as a lot of ancient Hebrew is. Folks, nobody speaks ancient Hebrew the way it was used, because it was, it was numbers and letters together. So there's all kinds of debate, on that.
Look, on that one, let's base it off of just whatever the basic text that they're pulling this from, where God looked at the circle of the earth.
Right.
Is that any different than somebody?
Circle.
Okay.
Right.
Is that any different from someone from the space station looking down at the circle of the earth? Because if you look at it, it looks like a circle. I mean, they're not seeing the entire sphere. They don't have it in their possession where they can turn it and twist it. They're seeing it as a circle. Now it's spinning, but they're still seeing it as a circle. So how is that any different?
Yeah, it's the same thing as like if something was a cube and you called it a square, you're not completely wrong. It's in the square, rectangular-ish family, just like, a sphere and a circle are cousins, right? They're cousins. Right. They're geometric cousins.
Hey, the pyramid's the pyramid, but if you stand to the side and stare at it, it looks like a triangle. I mean,
exactly
that
right.
is what it is.
Exactly right. And a stupid germ living on one side of the pyramid is like, wow, the world's a triangle.
That's so dumb. It's so dumb.
Right. And another one. So there's that one about, looking down on it. And then there's a reference to, it's kind of like that. It's the Mount Everest type of example where, in the New Testament, when the devil is trying to tempt Jesus, and trying to turn him away from God, he took him up on top of the mountain and said, look, here's all the kingdoms of the earth, and if the earth was round, you wouldn't see all the kingdoms of the earth, right?
Well, that's true. Well,
but that's,
my thing with also, if that happened, which it didn't, but if it did,
right.
So Satan's on the mountaintop for 40 days and 40 nights with Jesus,
right,
and talking about, look at all the kingdoms. Well, at that time, how many damn kingdoms were there? I mean, wasn't it pretty much just the Middle East and some little touches of Africa?
That's a great point. Yep. So maybe that's what it really was. Maybe that's all they really cared about in that part of the world, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so, you know what? That could be true, too. I mean, true in the sense of what it was written, because at the time, look at all the kingdoms. Well, maybe on a good day and you're on a high enough mountain, you might be able to see the stretch of all the kingdoms.
Right.
Because their kingdom, they weren't talking about like Washington, D.C., They're talking,
right.
I mean,
yeah.
So
the devil was really conning him. So he was just like, hey, you can have all this.
Right.
But not anything else on the other side. That's all still mine.
Exactly.
Because he knew it was there.
It's so stupid. And what was the third one? I'm sorry. I think the third one's the dumbest.
Yeah, the third one is even less. The third one, wait. It slipped out of my mind because I didn't even think we were going to get to it. There's a text where, hang on, sorry, where there's some part of it where God made the sun stop in the sky for a whole day. It stayed in the same place all day, and the moon stopped spinning. And that meant that the earth, it didn't necessarily mean that the earth was flat, but it meant that the earth doesn't move. Because if the sun was fixed in the sky, that meant that the earth wasn't moving.
Right, and everything moves around it.
Yeah, but
seemingly.
But that makes absolutely no sense, because that means that God stopped the sun and the moon, but didn't stop the earth also. So that means the earth doesn't spin?
Right. Because they say it doesn't spin.
Right. But that somehow proves it, because God stopped the sun and the moon, but not the earth.
Well, if nothing else, if that were the case, then if we're moving up, then you would say bye-bye to the sun and the moon real quick, because they're stopped and stationary and we just keep going up. So they're going to disappear. Either way, it's all the hokiest crap I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. And then there's more like that, all a lot of the verses in Genesis, they talk about, spreading out the firmament, and when we think about, and like pouring the water into this, there's kind of references to that. So that means that there must have been some type of receptacle to hold the water and blah, 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 and all that. So, I mean, it's just, none of that doesn't prove anything. That's a, it's a myth, it's a religious myth.
Well, I was going to say, there's nothing in the Bible that proves anything in any way, shape, or form, right?
Right. Yeah. So certainly what's in a book, a artistic rendition of what certain people believed happened thousands of years ago doesn't prove anything, no matter what it is. Right. It just proves that there's a book with this type of story in it. But that is put up. I'm just saying, and you can debate me on that all you want, but that's put up as evidence, and that is not evidence at all. Right. So. Because it can't be repeated, it can't be tested. It's all just based. It's not really based on anything. It's a story. So, there's also a story that the Earth stays in place because there's a giant man named Atlas underneath it that holds it up. So to me, That's just as true as that other story. So
I believe that more than the flat Earth, because at least then it's a sphere.
That's right. That's right.
It's like, come on.
That's right. And yeah, there's another Greek one, or Roman, I can't remember, a Greek one where they're not holding up, they're like pushing the earth up a hill, they're rolling it up the hill. So, I mean, and then, so the last one, which is really, and this one is kind of one of those things for me that changed my whole view of everything when I saw this. And it's really, the first time I saw it was on the and so here's part of this is something I'm going to refer to on these podcasts a lot. You're going to hear me refer to the original Carl Sagan special from the late 70s, Cosmos. Right, yes. So 11-part PBS special, and just anybody out there, if you haven't seen it, I mean, it still holds up. There's, in the versions you get today, there's like one or two little voiceovers where the science was wrong then, and they've kind of like voiced over the new data once or twice, but most of it is all broad science. And so one of the things that stuck with me that made me realize, wow, we really, when I say, well, not normal, everyday people, at least in America, walk around and they don't really know anything, right? But this is one of these things that made me learn, wow, there's a whole set of knowledge that we just don't even think about anymore because we really don't need it. But in this series, it showed how, I think it was the Phoenicians, really, 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 really ancient culture, just a little bit more contemporary than, say, the Egyptians. They are the first ones that I believe we have evidence that they actually proved the earth was round, and they calculated the circumference of the earth, and they were only off by like 10 miles. And so this is from like 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, a long, long time, whenever the Phoenicians was, and I'm just pulling this out of my ass here. So, I mean, I should have looked this up to be more precise. But what they did, I do know the experiment, because the experiment's been redone a lot of times, and a lot of cultures did it. The Greeks did it as well. The Greeks, I think it was Plato, also came up with this experiment, or it might have been Aristotle. I don't remember. It was one of those classical Greek philosophers also did this experiment separately and didn't know about the Phoenicians. But what they did is really, really simple, is they take a stick, okay? So you can prove the earth is round with a stick. That's all you need. You need a stick, and you need a sunny day. A stick and a sunny day. That's all you need. And then you need a way to measure off a distance that you can measure accurately, and it needs to be a significant distance, like a mile or a meter, and I think, or at least a half a mile away. You need to be able to mark off a half a mile. Okay, so you need to be able to measure that, and there's a way to do that. You can do that with a string. So you need a stick, and you need like 100-yard long string. Okay, so a ball of twine, stick and a ball of twine. You can figure out within 10 miles the circumference of the earth. So what they did is they put a stick in the ground, and then they marked off their distance, and they put a stick in the ground at that spot. And so one day, they looked at the time of day, and they looked at the shadow that the stick cast on the ground. And the angle of the shadow relative to the stick, they measured that angle. So at a certain time of day, it was, let's say, 12 degrees, the angle. So then the next day they walked their mile away, they had their stick in the ground there, and at the same time of day they measured the angle of that stick, and that one was different. It was like 13 degrees. So like, whoa. So they take the difference of of those 2 degrees, they multiply it by pi, and wabbo, you got the circumference of the earth. So there you go. And they figured it out, and they were accurate to within 10 miles. And that's because the earth is round, because the sun is far enough away that the light, and the reason is if the sun was, what they're getting is there's a slight difference, because the sun isn't it's not fixed in space like we're moving. So the reason they were off by 10 miles, because that measurement, the earth wasn't in the same place anymore. It had moved a little bit. So that messed up their calculation. So anyway, so in one day, you can't ever be, so that's, so if the earth was still, so again, that their error proves that the Earth isn't sitting still. So they knocked both of them out in one shot without even realizing it. But they discovered that the Earth was round, and at that time they didn't even say it was round. They knew at least it was curved. So. And that you take that math out, because this was all theoretical, and at that time this was groundbreaking math they were doing. Sure. So all that geometry it didn't really exist. But anyway, so that was one of these moments where I was like, wow, that's amazing, and that's special. That's special. I would recommend to anyone. So if you don't know a lot about science, or you want to learn some basic things about the scale and size of the universe, that is an excellent special. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson redid it like 3 years ago, and that caused so much controversy because he's actually talking about science, and people are like, what are you talking about? And like these are things that, oh man, it's just great. But Neil deGrasse Tyson's is good, and there's a lot of good updates in it. But I still there's some charm for some reason about the Carl Sagan one. He's just so good at explaining things. It's really good. Yes.
Yeah, it's great. Well, too bad he's not here to explain flat Earth.
No kidding. I wish he was still. I wish he died too early. And that's another good one we can do, because that's another thing that really insults my intelligence, is kind of how Carl Sagan got like the raw end of the deal. People tried to say he wasn't like a real scientist and all this kind of stuff, and he completely was, and it's just because he focused instead of, again, it's all academia, and I don't want to get into all that, but there's a great quote that says, science marches forward one funeral at a time. Because scientists just do not let go of their pet theories, and it's like an anchor on society. But gosh, this one is too. So hopefully this one will just die its own death. This flat Earth thing, it's just ridiculous.
Well, the difference is, and if there's one out there, I would love somebody to step forward, or I need to look it up so I can at least figure out which idiot I'm going to give crap to next. But the difference is that with this, I don't know that there is a scientist who believes this in today's age. If there is...
Yeah, there can't be... Right.
A valid scientist, right? I'm not talking about somebody who's trying to use science as a definition for how they're explaining what's going on. I'm talking about a true scientist, someone who's studied and learned.
Yeah, that's actually in the field, like it's in geology or in cosmology or physics, or astrophysics, that believes the Earth's flat.
Anything, God, right. I'll take any science.
Right. Well, not like see, the thing is, and this is, maybe this is part. I just don't get it, man. There's this phenomenon because remember the guy who was going to run for president a little bit, and then I haven't really heard much from him, but remember Ben Carson, right? And didn't Trump? Yeah, but Trump made him secretary of housing or something.
Yes,
isn't that what he is now? And like, have you seen anything? That kind of makes me want to Google him and see what's he doing. But the thing was, he was touted as like the Pablo Picasso of brain surgery, the Michelangelo of modern day neurosurgery, but believes the Earth is 6,000 years old.
Right, I know.
It's just like, how can you? But then the thing, there's people that were saying, but if you had a brain tumor, he's the guy that you want taking that brain tumor out of your head, so it's just, whatever.
I hear you, but that example though, I'm talking about like a scientist, not a doctor. Because with him, he might be one of those people that can be like, here's this topic. This is a topic, it's like, and it just comes to him. It's like, I get all the ins and outs of the human brain. I get how it works. And then you turn around and you're like, how old is the Earth? What does it matter? Who cares?
Right.
He might be a moron with that, but he's not a scientist. He's a doctor. I want a scientist.
Right. Exactly. And that's where I was going. I was just trying to laser in on what we're calling, right. So you want an accredited scientist that has a PhD from a real university.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. Let's find one. I'm sure there's not one.
No, there can't be one. I mean, geez. And if there is one, then I do want to hear from you. I mean, my God. Because first off, I need to know what school you went to, because I would tell anybody the degree means shit. I mean, come on. God. Flat Earth.
All right, so to kind of like wrap this one up, so we haven't really talked about why do people believe this? Like, why do people want to jump on why they get on this bandwagon? Oh, and by the way, I just googled is there a scientist that believes in flat Earth, and nothing came back. It's all just references to articles. It's all about how the Earth is really the misunderstanding history of the flat Earth. It doesn't really point to a scientist, so we'll have to dig a little bit deeper than Google.
I don't think we do, because I don't think there is one, but okay.
That's as deep as we need to go? Okay.
Well, all right. So for your question, I mean, honestly, here's
why?
the easy one. Well,
Why?
it depends. I think it depends on, like anything, it depends on the person and what their reasoning for it is. I think the easy answer, or for some of these people, is the religious part of it. And, with that, they already have a belief. It's like, this is my belief. I choose to believe this. It's my faith. It's what I'm told. So I'm going with it. And it's like, okay, fine. I get you, right? I'm not saying you're right, but that's your deal. It's the ones that aren't even touting this as a religious thing, but as a true scientific fact. Those are the ones I have no idea why they think this. I mean, I couldn't, I mean, because I think it's and to break it down, it's one of three things. It's religion, it's people that just want to be jackasses and buck the system to be an asshole, and then there are the people that truly do believe it, and they believe that there is a science to prove it. Now, those are the ones I don't get. I don't understand.
Well, right. I mean, do you think it's just... Is it just the need to belong to something? Because there's like, remember in school, is it kind of like an adolescent thing? Remember in school how it was fun to have like a secret club?
Sure.
And the secret club really it wasn't really a secret for anything. It's like you weren't really doing anything. I mean, well, in high school we were, but we didn't have a secret club. But it was fun when you were little to have like a secret club. Like, we're in a secret club, and we know something that you don't know. It goes back to like this just, I don't know, need to belong to something that's anti-mainstream,
Yeah.
And because there's a certain, at least what I observe, in my 47 years on the planet, is there are some people that, and I kind of fall into this in certain categories. I like to be against the grain. I don't want to be mainstream on certain things. Certain things I do want to be mainstream on. Like, I want to be mainstream where, like, I live in a house that has electric power and heat and air conditioning. Like, I'm in that mainstream, right? Sure. I don't live in a tent in the wilderness, although some people do, and that's that's really bucking the mainstream, right? But there's some people that they want to be outside the mainstream for something, and it's got to be something like that, because it's one of those things where nothing that you can point to proves or justifies what you're believing in. It's all so easily debunkable, and you just have to ignore everything. But it's just this, I want to be in this club for some reason. Why do people want to be in this club?
I don't know, but there are a million other clubs like that I could get my head around better. I mean, like, you could belong, right. You could belong to the club that believes in vampires. You could belong to the club that believes in Bigfoot. You could belong to any of those little clubs, and I could take that more seriously than this. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, look. Here, and that's the real trauma for these people for this is, more than likely, those people that need to feel that they need to belong to like this little club that bucks the system. And I'm not talking we're not talking buck the system on like your first example of living in the woods, because that's just a personal choice. I mean, yeah, people might think you're crazy and you're bucking, but you're not really bucking anything. You're just choosing to live your life the way you want to live it, right? But like, it's to buck the system is to believe in something that pushes that rubs the grain wrong to society. And the conspiracy theorists, it's like they do that a lot, and that's fine because they're more thought out than this. Like I said, vampires, ghost hunters, all this ridiculous crap. It's like, okay, but you know what? With those things, I can't tell you definitively that there isn't. I mean, you could look at it and say, well, it doesn't seem to make sense, but then there are examples where it's like, but what about this? Well, I don't know. I have to look into it.
Yeah, it would be hard to prove definitively that ghosts don't exist. I mean, you can look at the evidence that presented and say, well, there's no real evidence there, so what you've shown me doesn't really prove anything. But that doesn't mean there's not something yet out there. Like, this is one of these things that it's definitive. It's like you can't really still argue it over and over.
Right. So the poor sap who felt who was, picked on and beat up or whatever, who's like, I just need to belong to something, and I'm going to go against the grain. Okay, well, guess what? What you picked is just making you a bigger laughing stock than whatever you were before. I mean, it's stupid. I mean, it's like somebody's like, I'm a witch. It's like, yeah, you're just a dumb bitch. I mean, whatever. I mean, you say you're a witch. Okay, I can't really say you are or you aren't. But I can tell you the earth isn't flat. I mean, geez.
Right. Right. Wow. So to me, well, that's my hypothesis, I guess, on why folks are falling into this, because they just want to believe something that you can just ignore. You can be part of something that's anti-mainstream. I guess that's what it is. I mean, maybe it'd be interesting to see, all the data correlations on people that are actually members that have signed up, not just like the Facebook page, because I've liked the Facebook page for Flat Earth Society. I've liked it and I follow it, right? But I follow it ironically. I follow it as a comedy item. Like, I like seeing it come across my feed and I get a chuckle out of it.
Sure.
And if I didn't follow it, I wouldn't have seen that awesome video they did of the Nerf ball spinning around. That wouldn't have made me dive into that one, going, no, well, that's not a good comparison. That doesn't match up. But I follow it ironically, just like I follow lots of things like that just are just so ridiculous. I get a good laugh out of them. But man, I guess I'm glad. I don't know, and I don't mean to sound judgmental over these folks, but man, it's just kind of, it's really strange, that phenomenon of why folks are on this bandwagon and why they feel the need to believe in something that's so just blatantly not true. So anyway,
I don't know. Look, God, I have nothing to say. I mean, I don't have the answer to that, and,
right.
I don't think none of them could give me a valid one that I would accept.
And the other thing here is we've only, of the things that prove the Earth is round, we only touched on 4 of them, and the thing is, there's 20. And there's 20 really good. There's 20 really good ones that anybody can go and observe. And it's just, we hit on a few of them, like the seasons, and then the stars. You can see, there's certain constellations that at the same day and the same time, in North America you can see these stars, but in South America you can't see the same ones in North America. You can see some of them, but certain aren't viewable because of the horizon. You can't see. Right. And there's certain stars that you can only see in the southern hemisphere, and there's certain stars you can only see in the northern hemisphere. And it's just, if the Earth was flat, you should be able, just like you can see the moon, you should be, and you can see the Andromeda galaxy. If you know where to look, you can see it. And it's a gazillion miles away. I forget how far it is away. It's 500,000 light years, or maybe 500 million. It's a long fucking way away, and you can see it. You can see it with your eyeballs. So to say that you can't see the stars from one side of the flat earth to the other, it's just, and sorry, now I'm back on that again. Anyway, We didn't even scratch the surface on debunking.
No.
That's how goofy this thing is.
No. Well, I mean, so, I guess now I'm going to go outside and look at the moon, and I'm going to wonder why somebody on the other side of the earth can't see the same moon at the same time as me, but they can't. I'm going to take all my globes and throw them away, and I'm going to take my basket. No, I'm just going to throw them away because it's bullshit. And I'm going to take my basketball and I'm going to peel it open and lay it on the floor. And then I'm going to start doing measurements and start drawing like land surfaces on it and trying to figure out how this works.
Oh, man. Yes.
Or I'm just going to go to bed. I mean, because that's...
Yeah. Yeah. And try not to think about it. I mean, try to gain back your IQ points talking about this one. So I'm sure we're going to get some awesome feedback on this one. And I think the plan here is just knowing that this is such a, I mean, if we get any kind of decent downloads on this podcast, we're sure to get some awesome comments. So I think what we ought to plan on is some point in the future having another episode where we read feedback and respond to it. And good grief, how fun would it be if we could get somebody from the Flat Earth Society on so we could talk to them and listen to what they have to say about it. That would just be great.
That's going to be my mission going forward.
Yeah. Okay, you got to go find one.
I'm going to
find a Flat Earther.
I'm going to infiltrate the Facebook page, and I'm going to go in as a flat earther. I'm going to do my covert operation, and I'm going to be like, look, I'm all on board. Whatever. I mean, whoever, the Easter Bunny, whoever told you this shit, I'm with it. I mean, I got it. I want to meet him too. And I was going to go into it, and then finally I'm like, hey, are any of you from here? And I see if there's anybody here, and then I'm going to befriend them, and then let them know at the last minute that I'm going to crush your world, and I'm going to make you feel like 2 inches tall, and I'm going to be the most hated person you know. But you need it.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, and that's probably the thing. You got to be careful because they probably get that already. So you got to, the way we, But anyway, yes, that should definitely be your mission. That will be an interesting story at a minimum. It'll be an interesting story to hear your saga of infiltrating the Flat Earth Society. Yes, that is great.
Well, I can only do it when I'm completely drunk because there's no way in my right mind I could try to do this, and then if they start talking to me and befriend me, I'm like, yep.
Well, you're the man for the job, for sure.
Jeez, God,
because you're already a pretty awesome Facebook troll. So
I am, but not to this level. I mean, good God.
Right? Oh yeah, this is good. This is a good one. So
just wait till we get to Scientology. I'll be doing that too.
Oh boy. Oh boy. That's all I gotta say about that one. Yes, that one's on deck. So we have some awesome controversial topics coming up because a lot of this stuff is because really and again, back to the theme of this podcast, don't insult my intelligence. I mean, the reason we're jumping on this is because people are putting this stuff out there as it's real. So it insults our intelligence. Flat Earth. Don't insult my intelligence. No. Good grief.
I can't think of anything. I swear to God, I'm having a hard time really. I mean, maybe something will come up, but I'm having a hard time thinking of anything that I've looked at recently that insults my intelligence as much as this. It's like, you have got to be kidding me.
Yeah, it's hard to think. And we have to, maybe that's what we can do. Maybe we can start. Maybe we can try to kind of put a meter, on some of this stuff.
Sure.
Maybe this one is, we can start a meter. Maybe this can be kind of like the grand scale, because to me this is a 10, right? I mean, I can't. I mean, it's hard for me. I mean, there's some stuff that's bad out there, but this is a 10. Like, I mean, there's some. I mean, like, obviously, if there was somebody who believes in dragons, well, that's not. There's you know what I mean? And like, I honestly, I mean, okay, I could actually get behind that. I'm more apt to believe that maybe there were dragons. Maybe they didn't breathe fire, but maybe there were lizards that flew. To me, that's not that far. I mean, that's a pterodactyl is pretty close to that, right? So, sure. I mean, maybe there were. Who knows? I mean, I'm even down in a unicorn, to be honest with you. I could believe in a unicorn more than the earth is flat, because the thing is, when you think about a unicorn, right, there's a rhinoceros, right? A rhinoceros, it's a big mammal. It has one horn. There's a narwhal. A narwhal is you know what? And that would be an awesome one just to do. Let's just talk about narwhals for an hour. The narwhal is crazy. It's a whale with a big ass unicorn horn on it, like a legit unicorn horn.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? So I'm there. You go. That I can jump off that cliff. That yes, maybe there was a horse with one horn on it. I mean, because there's a damn whale with one, and there's a rhinoceros. So why couldn't there be a horse? And every once in a while you see a goat with only one horn. Anyway, so but dang. The flat Earth thing, that's a 10 on the DIMI meter, you know. So there you go. Now we have a DIMI meter, and that's a 10.
I agree. So, and you're right. So I guess now I need to go. I've got to go. I got to go hop on my unicorn and go find my friend Santa Claus.
That's
and
right.
We're going to talk about flat Earth for a couple hours more.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So unicorn is that's like a 7. You know, unicorns are 7, flat Earth is a 10. There you go. And I mean, you know, and you could argue me down to a 6.5 or 6 on a unicorn, but I'm stuck on 10 on flat Earth.
If I'm talking to a flat earther, that unicorn theory is going to. I might push that to a 3. I mean, it's okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I guess it's relative, right? All right. Well, I think this is a good podcast. I think we've talked it out. I don't think there's much more we can go into except other ways to debunk it, which is just kind of it just feels like we're piling on.
Well, like you said, there'll be another one on this. I can guarantee it. People just put your comments in. We'll see what we come up with. We'll read them back, and we'll try to answer everything that comes out. And I'll do my due diligence to see if I can find some moron to come on and talk with us.
All right. Well, for Don't Insult My Intelligence, I'm Beau.
I'm Gerry.
And stop insulting our intelligence.
That's it. We'll talk to you next time.
All right.
Okay, so we've got a couple corrections for this Flat Earth podcast. It looks like Gerry made one mistake and I made about 12 mistakes. So because, you know, we were just talking. We were having a conversation. So some of these details, some of these are very minute details we did get wrong, but we want to correct them. Because we know people are going to give us crap about this one.
That's right.
So Gerry, go ahead and fix yours. You said what?
So I kept throughout the entire segment, instead of saying revolve, I kept saying evolve. So clearly the Earth does not evolve around the sun. Maybe I was just wishful thinking that the flat earthers would evolve in their thought process, but
yes, we were all excited because it was like our first real podcast with some good content to argue about.
Absolutely.
All right, so here's my long list of freaking corrections. So in the beginning of the podcast, I talked about how if the Earth was flat, if you just dropped a pencil, it would show that the Earth could be flat. And what I was talking about there is gravity pulls things to the center. So if the Earth is flat like a record in the middle, you know, or it's flat like a pancake, the middle being the North Pole, the further you get out, the gravity's going to pull stuff towards the center. So if you drop something, it's not going to fall straight down. Because if you're on a globe, anywhere you are on a globe, the center of gravity is directly underneath you because it's a sphere, or very close to a sphere. So things fall straight down. But if you're flat, things are going to fall at an angle. So if you're way on the edge, something might fall at like a 45-degree angle. So anyway, there's an awesome cartoon about this or animation rather, you can see on YouTube. And then I called Saint Nick Saint Christopher. I really meant Saint Nick. We couldn't figure out what the London newspaper was at the time when they did the first big actual scientific experiment, and there were two papers. There was the Daily Herald and the Daily Mail.
both of which are still around today.
It's pretty cool.
And then the big bet that those papers did all the promotion around, it was actually put up by this guy John Hampton in support of the original scientist that was doing the experiment. But the bet was actually then won by this other gentleman, Russell Wallace, who did the same experiment, as it turns out, because when you get down in the history of this thing, it's like this long, drawn-out thing, and so it was done several times. But the guy eventually officially won it was Russell Wallace. And then the college that verified the result was not Oxford, but it was the King's College at Cambridge. So, you know, the same thing, a big snotty college.
Yeah, I don't know how you messed that one up.
Well, you know, I think England, everything's just Oxford, whatever. And then I talked about the Phoenicians were testing the circumference of the Earth with a stick, and that was actually not true. It is the actual experiment is actually true and accurate, but it was this guy Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes is this ancient Egyptian who actually did it, and he did it in like 150 BC, something in that time frame. So several thousand years ago. So, and this guy was way before his time. Made one of the first maps of the Earth, like round maps of the Earth. He actually had meridian and equator on there, and he also calculated the distance from the Earth to the sun somehow.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, really smart, way ahead of his time. So, anyway, but as it turns out, lots of cultures use the stick and measuring the shadow, you know, independently of each other. But as the records go, Eratosthenes was the first person documented to do it. Okay, so there you go. There's all our corrections. Have at it. I'm sure there's other things in there wrong, but complain to Jerry.
Yeah, because I don't care.
All right.